In fact, it does seem that many of these very serious crimes would go unreported if not for this kind of protection. What do you think?
You know, it's a good bill to have. It does seem to provide some protection, but I understand why it's controversial and there's quarrel over it. Because to some extent, and I'm going to speak generally for 50 states here, the way that prostitution laws really work is that the policy underpinning it is that it really incriminates the act of prostitution and the people who pay for it, not the perpetrators of it. And so to some extent, there was already some afforded level of protection for sex workers. Now, this is a step further in that direction, right? It's willing to protect them even if more crimes exist out of that. And really, people see that as incentivizing prostitution to some extent. But I do think something like this is necessary. There are way too many cases that come out where sex workers end up shooting their perpetrator in self-defense and get prosecuted for it. So this is some much-needed relief, I think, for them.
Well, you know, you're talking about this kind of evolution in the law where it does protect you know, sex trade workers, I guess is really what you're saying. And I want to ask you a little bit more about that because, you know, I've done various stories on sex trafficking and have discovered that really many sex workers began by being trafficked, and then they kind of fall into this cycle, and many who are working in the sex trade are trafficked. And then you know, I hear many stories of these women then being prosecuted while the Johns are not prosecuted. Do you think that that's changing under the law?
I do. I think we're definitely moving more and more towards being able to provide some level of protection. And you're absolutely right, Joy. Some of these sex workers start as early as 14, 15, and 16, you know, very young, not at the age of consent, not in most states. And so, you know, they do start out being trafficked, and then they're, you know, inevitably a byproduct of their experiences. And so I do think that bills like this are a step in the right direction in being able to, at least to some level, regularize this industry that's actually very hard to be able to govern.
Yeah, I want to actually pull up the letter of the law in Colorado, or the bill, I should say, because it is still a bill. So the Colorado state bill, basically the bill grants immunity to the charge of prostitution, soliciting for prostitution, or prostitute making displays to a person who seeks assistance from a law enforcement officer, the 911 system, or a medical provider for a victim, or as a victim of a violent crime or offense if the evidence for the charge of a prostitution offense was obtained as a result of the person seeking assistance or as a result of the need for assistance. A person who receives immunity for a prostitution offense is not immune from prosecution for other offenses, and a district attorney or law enforcement officer may obtain or use evidence obtained from a report, recording, or other statement provided as a result of the initial prostitution offense to prosecute any other offense. So do you think that there are enough checks and balances there, Matthew, in terms of how this bill is written?
I do. This is a pretty narrowly tailored law, right? I don't think we're going to have an issue of being overly, you know, burdensome. I think it's pretty narrow. If it has a very conditional statement, if the only way that we found out about the prosecution was through you letting us know about your injuries and what crime was committed against you, we'll afford you that immunity. And it's still narrowly tailored. They're saying that you're not immune from other acts. If there are other items such as drug offenses or possession or anything like that, then you're not immune of that. So it's actually very narrowly tailored, I think.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew Barhoma, for your analysis.